Are we ready? We can call our meeting to order, and I feel like maybe Kyle could lead us in the pledge today.
All right.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So we are here to talk about the budget. So take it away, Dan.
So, as many of us know, state law requires that local school districts adopt a budget for the upcoming fiscal year that begins on July 1st, 2022, that we have to adopt a budget prior to the start of that fiscal year. So even though the state has not finalized the school aid budget for the upcoming school year, we are required to sort of provide our best guess. And that guess is certainly based on all sorts of data and information that we have available already, but what we don't have is the final revenue pieces that will come from the state. We know that revenue is up, but it's still the purview of state lawmakers and the governor to decide what they want to do with that revenue. And they're talking about many different things with that revenue. In the past, you'd see that revenue coming to schools, and there hasn't been a whole lot, but this year there's more revenue. So some of that could be coming to schools, some of it could be diverted to other areas of the state budget, such as higher education, or it could be reallocated back to taxpayers in the form of tax cuts. We've heard of gas tax holidays or pauses that are out there that would impact dollars available for the school aid fund, other types of tax policy changes. So I do not believe we will see a final budget, as they call it, a deal, where all parties, the governor, the Senate, and the House are saying, yep, we agree, these are the terms, now we just need to go through the machinations of adopting it. I don't think we'll see that even until probably July, is my guess on that part. They're trying to get it done by the end of June, but they've got a lot to work through on that. So we have information here as part of statute as well to sort of show our work, show our thinking that we've got, and Julie's here to talk about that, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Julie.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so I always like to start with what are our legal requirements as a school district. So we talk about the Uniform Budget and Accounting Act, and you can see those codes up there. The Chief Administrative Officer, in our case, that would be our superintendent name, has to transmit the recommended budget, so that's what we're doing here today. Budget hearings, again, what we're doing today. And then there are a couple of requirements related to how we budget and that we can't budget into a deficit. So that would include new revenues or anticipated revenues along with our fund balance. That's what they consider our total revenue package, what we have available to spend each year. As Dan talked about, we're working on a set of assumptions when we're building this budget because we don't have everything complete at the state level. So what we have done is we have built in a $500 per pupil increase in our foundation allowance. We're anticipating a decrease of 75 students for next year, and that is really continues that trend that we have seen, and that the size of our 12th graders that are exiting and the size of our incoming kindergartners, we're not making up quite that difference. It's usually around the 150 student range, so we're getting about half of that are move-ins. We also are including our negotiated increases in employee wages for the settled contracts. So these were the contracts that were settled a year ago. So it's the second year of that. And also because we had this information and done and approved earlier, we included the approved contract enhancements for both the FHEA and the bus drivers that was approved last week. There's a minimal expense in employee insurance for next year. We already know that information. The Department of Treasury released what that medical cap increase was starting with 2023. They do that on a calendar year. So we know the back half of our fiscal year what that will be. We also know that we're going to, we anticipate that we're going to have increases in other areas such as our center program tuition, because that is really for people. So we're sure there will be an increase in that. We already know that we have a property insurance increase, utilities, we're all feeling that pinch along with fuel that we're all feeling as well. And we do have included in this initial budget the ESSER 3 formula equalization for just a small part of both of those. We are still waiting on a final approval from the state for, at the time this was done, for both of them. We had learned late last week that the formula part was approved. We're just waiting for the larger bucket, that's the $8.5 million equalization budget, to get approved. So in this one though, we feel pretty confident in some of the items that we have included in both of those applications. So we have the unfunded portion of our special education programs budgeted, as well as this summer's program, summer school program for our elementary students is included in this. So here is what the numbers look like for both a budget amendment for our current year. We always bring at this time, trying to get things a little bit closer for our current fiscal year, as well as give you the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. This is what we're looking at for our revenues, and then you have in front of you a packet as well that spells it out. You can see the current budget that we have and our current amendment. But we're looking at total revenue of this year, a little over $121.6 million. And ironically, about that same amount for next fiscal year as well. On the expenditure side, for the current year, we're proposing expenditures of about $125.4 million. And about same thing as the revenue. Same thing on the revenue side, about $125.4 million. Now, you know, we say this usually at every amendment time, and as we talk about where we think we might land for the end of the fiscal year, if we spent every dollar, that's where we would be. We know our history is not that. We usually have about a 2% variance for our expenditures. So we anticipate we'll be around that this year again as well.
Can I ask a question? I'm trying to figure out, because it sounds like, you know, Dan was mentioning that we're expecting increased money because there have been increased revenues, and then we've also got the ESSER funds and things like that, but the numbers look like they're not increased at all.
I know, I did the same thing, we put it all together. So there are a variety of things that happen. So if you look at our current fiscal year, we also have another bucket of ESSER budgeted. We have the ESSER 2 money budgeted in there. So that we are expending and will be going away. So some of the revenue is going off. We also have a one-time insurance refund that we included in the current year's budget. That was about almost $800,000. It was one time, so we don't expect that for the next fiscal year, so that is taken off. So it's kind of things like that that just go back and forth.
Okay.
I know, that's what, it looks funny because they almost look identical, like, oh, let's just change a couple numbers, but no, that's really what it is. Those are some of
We
the
also had a one-time off-schedule payment to all employees in December that we booked in this budget. That's not, because it's one-time included next year, so that was about $1.5 million.
That was about $1.5 million.
Yep, so those, but it's a great question, very astute observation on that part as they all add up.
So now just stepping back and looking at revenue and expense in total, and then related to our fund balance. So for our current fiscal year, we're anticipating using about $3.7 million for fund balance. Again, if we spent every dollar of that $125.4 million. So if that happened, we would land with a fund balance of about $17.9 million, or 14.34% of expenditures. And then if you look over in fiscal year 23, again, another $3.7 million anticipate use of fund balance. So projected to end next fiscal year with a $14.2 million fund balance, or 11.35%.
You want to go through some of your goals on percentages for fund balance to, are you going to talk about that later? Like where do you like to be with that? In the fund balance?
Me, the conservative financial person?
Yes.
You know, and looking back at my history and working with auditors too, kind of 15% is a more comfortable. We have a board policy that says 10% of our general fund for fund balance. I just prefer to be around 15%. That's just really covers the what if, right? You're in the middle of the year, and as we're seeing right now with fuel price increases, we know we've got cushion to cover that and don't have to worry about that. There's been times in the past where finances haven't been the best as they are right now in the state, and the state has come back in the middle of the year and done what's called a proration. So they've actually taken money back during the middle of the year. So having a fund balance helps with those types of things. It also helps with not having to borrow. There are a number of districts across the state, even in our area, that the way the state aid payment structure is, you don't get the first payment for the new year until October, and the last payment is in August. So there are a number of districts who really have to find themselves in a borrowing situation for the month of September to meet their payroll needs. Having a good fund balance helps to not have to do that.
And I would just point out that, again, up here, you know, that assumes we spend every nickel and every budget line item. As Julie said, typically there's a positive variance, meaning that we spend on average $2.5 million less than what we've got budgeted. That's what's left in all those different line items, and you add all of that up. So I think our imbalance here will look more like, we could all put a figure on a napkin and throw it in the hat and see who's right. But I think it might be more like $1.5 million. We intended this year to draw from our fund balance. We knew it was getting up there, and we wanted to pull that back down. It is always a little bit of a science and a little bit of an art as we're pulling that back down to sort of land that perfectly so we don't embed structural costs that continue to go and go and go and go. And so we look at those things as well. But as Julie said, she's conservative in her budgeting, which also means we're going to sort of paint the picture here that would have revenues conservatively estimated, means maybe on the low side, and expenditures conservatively estimated, which would mean if we spend everything, if we needed to spend everything. And usually we are able to get favorable results, certainly on the expenditure side and underspending what we budget. So I think, you know, as we look way out, this number here is probably going to look more like this when we get to that point in time. That's my sense.
That's my spidey sense as well.
Yeah, is it okay?
Spidey sense. All right, so we also present to you our special revenue fund, and again, just like the general fund, we're presenting an amendment for the current fiscal year and then the proposed budget for next fiscal year. So in the current year, this includes, and let me back up for a minute, our special revenue fund, just as a reminder, includes our food service fund, our child care fund, as well as our school and student activity fund. So those three comprise the special revenue fund. So we're looking at a little under $9.4 million of revenue for this year, 7.5 of expense. So adding about almost $1.9 million in fund balance for these three groups for this current fiscal year, landing us around $5.9 million. Same thing holds for this. I'm not quite sure. I don't really track the percentage variance at the end of the year for this fund because they are self-funded. The general fund doesn't put money into any of these. It's an important note. So we expect to end this fiscal year with about $5.9 million, and then moving forward to next year, we're looking to use some of that fund balance, and in particular that's related to our food service program. So we've talked about that a couple times, where we have more than 3 months worth of operating expense in our fund balance, so we're required to spend that down. And so, I mean, that fund balance can't be more than, it's like around $900,000, just to give you an idea. All right, so the other part I have, and this is the last slide, it's related to the millage levy. So part of this budget hearing process is to let everybody know what they can anticipate for taxes for next year. So at our operating mills, and this is for the non-homestead property, so it's not for your first home. If you're fortunate enough to have a second home, or if you're industrial commercial, then this top one would apply to you, but we're looking at levying 17.6614 mills this year. There is a rollback to that, so the property tax values grew faster than the rate of inflation, and that's what that tells us. We can't levy more than that, lesser of that, and 5%, so that's what that reflects. Our recreation millage also has a rollback. a little bit smaller this year. This is for the non-homestead and homestead properties, so it's all properties. So we're looking at levying 0.9815 mils. And then finally, our debt millage, so that's the debt or the bonds that we were able to sell to continue to make capital improvements on all of our buildings. We're looking at next year levying 6.05 mils. That too is on all properties, non-homestead and homestead, and that's a slight reduction from this current year. We're at 6.1.
I would just point out here that these are the lowest tax rates we've seen at least in 20 years in the district. So that's good news in that regard. And we're going to keep looking back to see where we have to go back in time to find rates that are lower than this. The operating millage rate of 18 mils was something that the legislature and state, when we voted to change the Constitution with Proposal A, that was an integral part of it. There was a debate at that time if the state should just simply put that levy in along with the 6 mil education tax, statewide education tax on properties. But they said no, they wanted to be able to engage local taxpayers in the non-homestead. So this authorization comes through at the local level. And again, the state intends that it's 18 mils, but it's rolled back here, these fractions, because of the property value growth exceeding the rate of inflation. So those are Headley rollbacks. We could do a whole 2-hour session on the Headley Amendment to the Constitution and how rollbacks work on that, but we'll forego that today. The recreation millage, our voters authorized that almost 20 years ago in 2004, and we're getting ready to ask voters if they want to renew that. Again, that goes to all those non-K-12 education items, so enrichment programs, senior citizens programs, programs for preschoolers, and the like on all of that. So we'll, of course, talk more about that since it's been almost 20 years since we've engaged our community on what that is and how they can get involved. And then, as Julie mentioned, on the debt millage, that's good news there. It wasn't too long ago. We were at, let's see, 7.6 mils we were levying back in 2017, 2018. So this is coming down quite nicely, but just also as we were hoping it would as well. And it should continue to fall, even if we were to go out to the community to have additional bond referenda. We still see this rate falling on that, so that's good news for us.
Any other questions for me? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So that is all we need to go through for right now. Any other comments?
Yeah, for our public hearing. Also, just any questions that anyone in the audience might have related to any of the budget figures that we have here, or anything related, as this is a public hearing portion of this. No? Okay.
Thank you, Tyler, because I know you were part of this.
Yes, thank you, Tyler, for all your
Yes.
work on this too. Definitely.
Okay, so at this point, we need to move into the consent grouping. So we will need a motion to approve the consent grouping.
I move that we approve consent grouping items 4A through C.
And I'll need a second.
Second.
Okay, and Superintendent Beam, do you want to draw out some discussion on these?
Well, what we have here is what we've just talked about, our board resolutions to make our final budget amendment to the current fiscal year. So that is item B1, and that also is item B2 for our school service funds. So we're making those final amendments there. And then for the upcoming school year, that's items B3 and B4 for the general fund and for the school service fund. So those are the items there in business section of the consent grouping. Under the Human Resources section, these are things we've also talked about previously, but wanted to bring forward to you. The remaining 5 collective bargaining agreements, as we've received now more information about where the state budget is going to be, we negotiated a 2-year agreement with these bargaining groups, our employee groups, in some cases well over a year ago. And now that we've got more information and we know costs have gone up, we have additional revenue that's going to be coming in more than what we thought that we could prognosticate a year ago when we were putting these contracts together. So we want to bring forth these enhancements. These enhancements help us to retain our current staff and help us to recruit new staff as well. So that's what you see with these remaining 5 collective bargaining groups, along with the 2 groups that we brought to the board a week ago. So that includes all 7 groups now at this point in time. And those are the items that we have in the consent grouping, every single one of them.
Okay. And are there any questions or comments or discussion from the board on any of these items? This time? Okay. Then I think we need to have a roll call vote on these. Mrs. Covell?
Mr. Mashad?
Yes.
Dr. Fawson?
Yes.
Kristen Cavell, yes. And Ms. Callahan?
Yes. Okay.
All right.
I will turn this back over to you.
All right, we have one other item, and because we haven't presented this before, we wanted to bring it to you as a separate item for consideration. We are just fine with this from an administrative standpoint, but this is Ada Township coming to the district, as they have from time to time in previous years. What they're looking to do is to extend their non-motorized pathway down Pettis Avenue. They don't really have a pathway along the stretch that they're talking about right now, which is, if you can imagine where Chief Hazy Cloud County Park is, along Pettis, just, what would that be, north of Honey Creek, I guess. And they're taking a pathway from there all the way up and connecting to the pathway that exists at Knapp and Pettis. Right now, there is a pathway that's there at Knapp and Pettis, but it doesn't come south. So they're looking to extend that whole pathway. And that includes part of school district property where the eastern campus is. And so what they're asking for is a easement from the school district that would encompass that pedestrian pathway. And we have had our legal counsel review the easement request. And they're good with everything from that standpoint. And also at the back of the packet, you hopefully saw a little bit of a map, and it's very similar with all of the other pedestrian easements. They go pretty close to the right-of-way of the roadway. Ada Township has also worked with the Kent County Road Commission on setting this all up. We think it's actually an enhancement to our own property on that for pedestrian use along the way. They make a few deviations. There's a drainage creek that comes through our property along there, and they just kind of account for that. So the pedestrian easement isn't in the drainage creek, if you will, in that, but nothing unusual in that regard. So Julie, anything else you'd add on this piece in your discussions with Township or legal counsel?
They will be putting bike safety signage along all of our sections of the property. So if you think about our entrances and people coming in and out at peak times, so there'll be safety signage there. The other piece that we're pretty excited about is we've been doing master planning for Eastern High and that site, trying to figure out how to alleviate that traffic there. It's pretty busy coming in and out of Eastern, and so one of our ideas is to create a separate entrance for our student drivers. And so what they have agreed to, and have actually secured permission from the road commission as well, that they would be approval, is to add a second entrance off from Pettis at a future date to be specified when we're ready to move forward. But that they would help create that entrance and do that for us. That's a big value for us. That's huge. If you were around when we put that deceleration lane out there, and that was just a little bit before me. That's quite an undertaking.
It was that, really?
To
I feel like that was just yesterday.
I know.
It was just yesterday.
Yeah.
No, but that's a really big deal to be able to add a second entrance like that. You think of traffic coming in and out. So we're pretty excited that we feel like it's a win-win, right? The bike, the non-motorized path is a win for that community, and it, also for us. Yeah, and then adding that extra, the new entrance. So
Yeah. As a runner, I'm super excited about
Good.
this.
right.
Although I really don't enjoy running down there. It's just it's like 2.5 miles or something. I should know
Yes.
exactly how
There's
far.
some hills involved, yeah, to get
Yes.
there from
Yes.
It's good for our runners too. They're always
That's a great
track and
point.
field. I mean, they're always right on the shoulder of pedestals.
Right.
It's not.
And it is actually a nice wide shoulder, but not for a team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine for
Great
one old
example.
mom walking along, but
Yep. Yep. So because we weren't able to bring this to one of our committee meetings, we couldn't include it in the consent grouping. So this just simply needs a separate vote, and it can be a voice vote. It doesn't need to be a roll call vote.
okay. All right. So I need a motion to approve the easement as discussed.
I move that we approve the easement.
And do we have a second?
No, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Yay. Okay.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Superintendent's report.
You know, I just simply want to thank everyone for the culmination of the school year, and we were able to close out with all of our students, kindergarten through 11th grade last week, and it was exciting, and it was a celebratory end to the school year. I do want to note one thing that we are grieving, and that's the passing of one of our own employees. Joe Veneclace was a custodian at Eastern Middle and High School, and Joe passed away unexpectedly. I had seen Joe about a week and a half ago at Eastern and was talking to him, and he had shared that he wasn't feeling great, but he had an upcoming procedure with his physician. He did have that procedure. It was successful. He came home, lives with his brother, and then was found unresponsive. And right now, there is not any memorial service set. It may happen at a future date, but I'll keep you posted. Joe was a great guy. He was always engaging people and students. I mentioned to my wife, because my wife knows him, because every time we go to a football game, there was Joe sort of staffing the parking gate to park in the back, and he would always talk with my wife. She's a bow hunter, so they would always talk bow hunting about things, and just someone who helped out in so many ways, and he will be deeply missed, and it was quite a shock. So I just wanted to share that, and we will express our condolences to the family. I've already done so through a little bit on a website that they have right now through the funeral home, but if there's a service, I'll let folks know as well as we go forward. That's all I have for Superintendent's report.
Okay, all right. Well, at this time, is there any board communication that we want to share? All right, then we can turn it over to public comments before we move into our closed session for more on the superintendent's evaluation. Are there any public comments today? All right, well, seeing that there are none, I think we need to have a motion to move into closed session to conduct the superintendent's evaluation. Do I have a motion?
I move that
Okay.
I move that we move into closed session.
Thank you. All right, the second?
I'll second.
Mr. Michaud. Okay, we are in closed session. All right, well, welcome back. I'm going to bring us back in from our closed session. And I don't have any other, is there any other business the board wants to bring up?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, well then I guess all we need is a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn this special meeting.
And do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, and we are adjourned.